Welcome back to the Broadman Word, and today we're just going to be looking at one verse in the book of Esther. And the reason why is because I believe that it is very much the thematic verse of the whole entire book, but also we want to answer the question, or start to answer the question, why don't we see God mentioned specifically in this book? And I think this verse gives us a little bit of insight as we start to try to piece together why that is. So go back to Esther chapter 4. Go back to Esther chapter 4. We are going to be looking at Esther 4:14 today. So Esther 4:14 is this. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Just on the surface, why do I believe that this is the thematic verse of the whole entire book? It's because, and who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this, is talking about the providence of God, is talking about the sovereignty of God. Yes, he knew exactly what Haman was thinking about, and that decree was not surprising to him. God did not in heaven. He did not just he wasn't just sitting in heaven, and then Haman puts the decree into motion, and God says, "Well, hold on, I didn't know he was going to do that." So I definitely don't think that's the case. So with that being said, then you have to say, okay, uh, what is going on? Why is Esther in this role? And it gets you ready for her plan to be put into motion in order to trap Haman. And eventually that comes to fruition. But the other thing I think too is that even in the midst of them being in exile in Susa, after being in exile in Babylon, um, even all of this, even all of the the fact that the Jewish people are in exile and are not back in Jerusalem, um, that even that is put into plan. The fact that they were in Egypt for so long, but then God raised up Moses and Aaron in order to help bring forward the Exodus out of Egypt. Then you have the Babylonian exile, but then we have King Cyrus built up not just to take over the Babylonian Empire and quash it, but then to put into motion just the decree to say, look, the Jews can go back to their homeland, and then to raise up Nehemiah and to have him say, look, I am going to leave my job in exile as the cupbearer to the king, and I'm going to go back to my homeland of Jerusalem and help my people rebuild. It is a beautiful thing to see. And I think that's why we definitely see this as the thematic verse for the whole entire chapter. Uh, yes, absolutely. Esther was put into her position for such a time as this. Queen Vashti, even though even though she did not do anything wrong, we have no idea if she would have stood up for the Jewish people with Haman's decree. We have no idea if that would have been the case. And so, therefore, it is very important that Esther is in that spot. Now, the big question on top of that, on top of why I believe this is the thematic verse of the whole entire chapter, talking about the providence of God and the sovereignty of God, is the mention of, okay, but why do we not see him mentioned by name? There are definitely sections in scriptures where we don't see him mentioned by name, and yet we see him working behind the scenes and putting things in motion, even if he's not given the credit. Even if the Lord is not given the credit explicitly within that section of scripture. Here it's just a broader scale of that, with a when it's looking at a whole entire book. So it's not that we don't see this before, it's just that we don't see this in such a broad scope. And a lot of people, I think it is a very fair connection with the book of Job. With the book of Job, you don't see God uh, being involved too much. We see him in chapters 1, 2, and then we see him at the end of the book of Job. But throughout the book, he is mentioned all the time in the conversations with Job, or most 99% of the time. Yeah, a lot of the time. But he's mentioned a lot with the conversations between Job and his friends. So that's why, yes, it is somewhat connected to Esther, because we don't see the actions of God outside of the first couple chapters and the last few chapters of the book of Job. But here, it's very much just not really there. So why is that? Why do we have this book in Scripture? Well, one, because it was seen as a book of canon in church history past, which we can go into a little bit later when we talk about things like your Nicene Creed, your Constantinople, uh, your Trent, Council of Trent. So we can get into all of that when it comes to creeds some other time. But for this purpose, I think the big reason, and one of the encouraging things that I think with this book, is that it gives you a snapshot in seeing how we really kind of view what God is up to when we are going through really tough times. When you and I are going through tough times, whether it is the illness of a loved one, whether it is loss of job, whether it is just so many different things in life, it's not like God audibly speaks into those things and says, I will fix this. I will offer you a better job. I will heal this person within the next 24 hours. He doesn't often do that. I'm not going to say never. Never. I'm not going to say never. But it is very, very rare. We don't see how he interacts a lot with the with folks in scripture. We don't see that in our daily day to day just struggles and tribulations. But we do feel this sense of God is working behind the scenes, just like he did with Esther. And just because, yes, you are going through a massive trial, but God is putting somebody in your pathway to help you along the way, like Esther is going to be helping the Jewish people. That is an incredibly important thing, and that is an evidence that God is working for your uh, for your situation. Now, it may not be in the time that you want, and it may not be the result that you want. A lot of people say, "Oh, God works for our good." Yes, he works for our spiritual good. It's not always that he works for our physical good or our monetary good. I mean, there are countless examples of Christian martyrs. Did they all want to die in that moment? Probably not. And yet, God has them walk through those moments of martyrdom. Why is that? Because he has written every single thing for our spiritual good. And so that is a little what we see with this one verse. So, with that being said, I hope that that gives you a level of encouragement in why, yes, we may not see God mentioned explicitly and specifically as much in this book, but definitely does not mean that he's not at work. So I will see you next week, though, as Esther puts in her plan on how to trap Haman. And so she will start that plan next week. Thanks.